Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about homework 2 and basically how to solve a few problems from it. The assignment just asked for us to get the user's name, age, the gender as in male or female as a string, the length and width of the person's room, then it should display an example such as this one. So Royal is a 23-year-old male with a room size of 150, which multiplied to the length and the width. Seems pretty simple, but since we're going into a new language, there are a few things that you have to include at the top in order for you to work with the keyboard. Also, there's a problem when you get an integer and then you follow it with a string. We'll talk about that while we're writing the program. So let's go ahead and get into the program. That should be large enough for you to see. I created a homework 2 and it's still blank. I haven't done anything on there. First off, I'm going to teach you a little bit of the basics in case you haven't taken C++ in a while. So in C++, we were able to create variables like that, to where the data type is an int, and we're going to store it inside memory, and we'll call that num. So you could do basic things like num equals to 10, and now inside the variable num, we have the value 10. We could do addition with multiple variables. Okay, so we got num2. Num2 equals to 15. Now, it still does the same type of math, such as it does the part on the right side, which is num plus num2, and then it'll store that inside num2. So it's getting rid of the previous 15 and updating it with the new value of 10 plus 15. So we could see this running. Did anyone see any problems? Well, we don't have a display. Okay, once again, on the first lesson, we learned cout does not work. This does get a little bit annoying having to type a whole sentence out. That right there is something you have to memorize because you're going to use it a lot. Every single time you're going to display, you want to display that whole thing. It also has the ability to have a string portion, and you're adding the value here to the string. So it's concatenating it all into one string and being sent out to the monitor. Well, down here. The sum is 25. Okay, so it's just like C++. I do not believe I need to go too much further into detail with integer values. But for strings, we do not, well, look, this legend. We do not need to do, okay, the whole string portion at the top. We don't include anything at the top, actually. It's ready to be used. But this time it has a capital S for string. Okay, so the data type, it's a class. It starts with a capital letter. And name, I could do something like, well, so name equals to John. And I'm going to display name. Now it would be cheating if I put here your name is John, because we know it's John. So we're always supposed to use, well, not always, but we want to always use the variable instead of this here, because if they change that later on, well, we hard-coded the name John in there, which we don't want to hard-code anything. We want everything based off of what is in memory at the time. So right now it's going to say, your name is John. Now we initialized this variable with John, but how do we get that from the keyboard? Okay, how do we get these two values from the keyboard? So I'm going to go ahead and show you that you do need to include something in order to read from the keyboard. I'm going to go back up here. Okay, and the command that you need to type is import java.util.scanner. Okay, so the scanner is basically going to be used when you're going to get something from the keyboard. Here, I like to put it on the first line right after the main. You're going to, okay, the data type is a scanner, it's an object, and you could call it any name you want. I'm going to call it scan. Equals a new scanner, and in here you're going to say it's coming from system in. Okay, yes, it does have a little squiggly, but this just means I haven't used it yet. So once we have this, we've told the computer that we are going to use the variable name scan every single time that we want to look at the computer input from the keyboard. Okay, so now instead of naming it here, I am going to declare it. I'm going to declare it after asking the user for that information. What is your name? Okay. Now to input, you are going to do name equals scan dot. Now if we're going to get someone's name, we want to get the entire line. Next line. Okay, so now we have name. Now we want to get the two numbers. Enter two numbers, I believe, would be good enough. And they're going to input num, which is an int. So I'm going to put, once again, dot. And the nice thing is that it gives you all the different things that you could use. Here's the next int. Okay. Num2 equals scan dot next int. And we're doing the same command as before. Num2 equals num plus num2. Let's see if it gives us the same information. If I were to type 10 and 15 and the name as John. What is your name? John. Enter two numbers, 10, 15. The sum is 25. Your name is John. So now we have the keyboard input able to work with our program. Now, our assignment was asking for different information. It was asking for, okay, the name, that's good, an age, which is an int, and then another string. And I said there might be a problem with that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and type an example of how you might face something like this. I'll just get rid of this. I'm going to keep on using scan, that's perfectly fine. String name, that's perfectly fine. Int age. And let's go ahead and use the address. Next, let's ask them for what is your name. Name equals whatever they type. Okay. Now, just to verify what they typed, I'm going to go ahead and do a system.out.println. You typed. Okay. So that's just repeating what I typed to make sure the information is correct. All right. Now, what is your age? Okay, so far we're doing everything based on what we previously worked on. And we're going to say you typed age. And the last one. Okay, so we've got all our information. Let's go ahead and run it. What is your name? I'm going to put my name, Nick. What is your age? I'll put a random age. I'm 22, okay. You typed 22. What is your address? You typed... You see the problem here? I did not type anything. Yet, it's saying I typed... Well, I typed nothing. Why is it doing this? Why isn't it not picking up this section? Some of you went through the book searching for that answer. That's exactly what I wanted you guys to do. If you solved it, that's great. If you didn't, here's why. Okay, so on here, the user types in here, well, they're going to type in their name, which was Nick. And then I pressed enter. Right? So I pressed enter. Once I press enter, in here, it got the entire string up to the enter. Here, I have an int. I typed in 22, then I pressed enter. Now, age is an int, so it receives 22. The enter is still in the buffer. When it gets to here, it's going to get the whole line until it meets the enter, which is the new line. Since there's already a new line in buffer, it's done. So it will not ask for your input. So we need to get rid of this new line. To do so, put it in between here. You could basically put it anywhere after you receive the age and before you do this scan for the address. You're going to get a scan dot next line. Now this scan dot next line is going to get the next line, which in this case is just the enter from the buffer, and it's going to send it Nowhere. So it's just basically removing it from the buffer, and that's it. There is no equal sign before it, like these, therefore it's not going into a variable. Now that this new line is gone, we should have an empty buffer for us to input an address. Okay, and I forgot the little space here. That was not on purpose. You typed 123 length. Okay, so once again, the problem is every single time that you're going to get a integer or number, make sure that you get rid of the extra mu line that's in the buffer if you are going to do a string next. Now, if you have get the age and then get their social security or something like that, it's an integer, so it's getting the number portion, and the next one is an integer as well, so another integer portion, so it's avoiding the new line altogether. So you don't really have to do it after each integer. But yes, it is important here. Okay, since this is a string. This should have been enough to help out with homework 2. Let's go ahead and look at homework 3. You're to create a house with 2 rooms in the house. The following is a C++ highlighted, and it's not really in Java, it's different. So in C++, I would have created the class room with the private variables of length and width, and the public, well, the constructor and all the other functions and accessors and everything. Then we have a house. The house, the only variables that it has, which are private, room 1 and room 2. These two are objects. They are of class room, which we defined before. Okay, so the challenge is that in the main, you're going to create a house. By creating a house, by default, it already has 2 rooms. You have to declare the correct constructor in order to make this work. Also, since length and width belong to room, and in the main you only have access to the house itself needs a way for you to get the length and width and give it back to the main. This is the challenge part of this assignment. Okay? Down here it does say it wants an input length and width, a length and width of another room, and whoever, okay, the parents are going to get the bigger room, right? The children, all of them, will get the second room. So it's only 2 rooms, I'm sorry. And everything else is the same. I'm just going to teach a little bit on this. Okay, so even though it is homework 2, I'll go ahead and create a Java class. Next. And I'm going to call this one room. Notice that it added it to our homework 2. It's still the same package as this guy up here. You probably can't see because it's zoomed out. Let's go ahead and that should be big enough. Key differences. It is not like C++ to where you can put private variables in here. Okay, if you're going to declare something private, you have private okay, so each one needs to be declared as private. It doesn't have the general one like the one in C++. let's see. After this, if you remember, should be the constructors. Everything else was public, correct? Public, room, and in here, I'm just going to set them to 0. And then the tricky one, which I'm debating whether I should do this. I'll go ahead and do this one. Room. And I am receiving 2 things for this room, since it's overloaded. I am receiving, okay, the length and the width. What I usually do, I don't usually just write a single letter, but the example I gave turns out to be with a single letter. Therefore, that's why I'm doing this here. So usually I like to have this as, you know, a single letter as well. And the difference between both of them being that the ones which belong to the room are in uppercase, while the ones passed in are in lowercase. So the ones in the room, which is the uppercase, equals the ones being passed in to the constructor, the lowercase one. Same thing with the width. Now, if you really prefer, you could type out the entire word length. Actually, I would advise for you to do that, as LW will start getting complicated to understand, especially if you have more variables with a single letter as their name. Then you need the get and the set that we're used to in C++. Those you will put here as well. Again, they are public. And let's start off with void. Okay, so the void ones are the ones that are going to be set. So I'm going to put set, and I could have called this set length, but since I called it L, I'm going to call it set L. And L is going to be set based on what I send in from the main, so I have int L equals to L. This is a shorter version of basically our overloaded one because we're doing each one individually instead of both at the same time. So set W, int W equals W, and then we have our get. So the get is getting the information from the class and giving it back to whoever calls this function here. It has no parameters, and all it does is returns the length. So get length, okay, returning the length. Get width, okay, return the width. This is our basic room. Now I'm gonna just talk a little bit about how you create a room. I do not want to create the house for you guys, as that would really give the answer to the assignment. So I will speak a little bit about how you create objects in Java. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open homework 2. And let's say here I wanted to create a room. So I'm going to just select all this. I'm going to comment it out. This up here, you can barely see it, but it's the comment. I don't need the scanner either. Okay, so in here I'm going to create a room. Well, room 1. Okay, as we're used to, this is how you create a room. But in here, what we like to do is, in a single sentence, you can put it into the new command. Now, the new command is telling me that we're creating an instance of the object room. So room 1 is now created. There are no parameters in here, therefore it's being created based on the default constructor. So if I were to output room1 dot get L, get W, and this is something I mess up on quite often. So now we have a very, very small program. I'll go ahead and show you that it has zeros. In here, what happens if I put 5, 8? Okay, so now it sent the 5 and the 8 into the Java class. The 5 came in here, the 8 came in here. Okay, the 5 was assigned to the L. The 8 was assigned to the W. Later on in the main, when I called this here, room1.getL, it called the function getL. So I'm going to go here to getL, okay? And all it did was return L. So now if you remember in the constructor, I had gotten the L from the main, which was the 5. So it's returning the 5 back, and that's why you see the display of 5. Possibly if you could see that. Ooh, better, I should have left that there. Okay, so the second one went in W. When I used the get W, it returns the 8. That's why you see the 8 as the output. When we create the class house, the difficult part is that inside house, we have 2 rooms. Now remember, we have to use the new command in order to create an instance of each room. So in the constructor, make sure that you say something like room1 equals new room. Same thing with room 2. The difficult part is the overloaded one for this in this case, because you are going to pass 4 things from the main into the house, which is the length and width of room 1, the length of width of room 2. Okay. After that, you're going to pass the length and width from the house to each individual room. I'll cover that just a little bit. Possibly. Let's go ahead and create the house class. Okay, so now we have a house. In here, basically what I mean, I've already answered the private variable, private room 1. Room 2. Public house, which I said, I'm going to go ahead and make this into a little bit bigger so you can see the code here. And it's going to be to a new room. Into new room. Okay, now notice the little underline. You should be able to already know what the problem is based on your C++ knowledge. Let's see how the mouse interacting with it helps us. So it says invalid method declaration, return type required. Return type. That might make a few students go and try to put something like void or something like that, but this here is a constructor. And the constructor is always supposed to be named the same thing as the class. Therefore, because of capitalization, it was thinking it was a regular function. With functions, you need return types. With a constructor, you do not. Okay, so this is our basic one. I do not want to go too much further, but I will mention that the overloaded one is going to take 4 inputs from the main. It's got length 1, width 1. So that's for the first room. Length 2, width 2. That's for the second room. And then the tricky part. I will let you figure this out. How do you pass length 1 and W1 into the first room instance? Length 2, W2 in the second room instance. And it really helps that you have this here. I was showing you how you create a room 1 using the overloaded constructor. You basically put the first value there, the second value there. I do believe you have enough information to complete this assignment. By the way, it shows a little exclamation point. I don't know if you can see it. Error parsing. That means it's incorrect. Obviously, there are problems here, such as it's empty. But you are going to finish this, finish the entire main, make sure that it gives our output the same as this here. Make sure you use the class objects for this program. What that means is that I do have some students that decide to, inside the main, get something like, oh, not string, sorry. Int L1, okay, I'll do it the long one. Int W1, int L2, int W2. And then they start asking the user, please enter the length 1, please enter the width 1. And they do all this, and they get all the data. They create the room perfect. But then they do something like this. If L1 times W1 is greater than L2 times W2. Okay, as you can see here, you're getting L1, W1 as the variables that they typed in. You're ignoring the actual rooms inside here. Okay, so what I wanted you to do was go into the house and find what is the length 1 times width 1. So you're getting the area of room 1 by accessing the house. If it's bigger than the house's room 2. Okay, if you use this method here, I am going to give you a 0. From now on, every single time that you create an object, you need to use that object. Or else what's the purpose of creating it? Okay, that's enough for today. I will give more tutorials later on. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this video. Thank you.